This is absolutely unacceptable. I demand to see the manager right now. How hard is it to do your job?
The broth hit the white linen at 7:14 p.m. Not fast, not loud. Just a slow, weightless drop. The way coffee falls in dreams you forget by morning. A white bowl with a gold rim tipped without warning. $200 a plate. 3 names on a waiting list. The waitress didn't see it tipping. She was 15 steps into a turn she had rehearsed 1,000 times. Left foot first, hip closed, tray tucked to the shoulder, when her hands slipped. Not because she was clumsy, because her 6-year-old daughter had been crying into her phone an hour earlier, whispering the words every waitress dreads on a Tuesday. "Mommy, am I going to be a waitress too?" The broth crawled across the linen like something alive. It reached the cuff of a Brioni suit that had never once been dry cleaned by the man who owned it. That man was Daniel Ashford, 43, the youngest partner the Halcyon Group had ever taken in. He was closing a $91 million deal with a man named Sato from Singapore, who had not eaten red meat since 1998 and had ordered the halibut in a voice so soft the waitstaff had to lean in. Daniel looked down at the broth on his sleeve. He did not flinch. He was the kind of man who had stopped flinching at 26. "Where is the manager?" he said. Not to anyone, just to the air. A busboy was already running. A sommelier was already wiping. 3 waiters circled the table with the synchronized horror of people who had seen this before. Sato went back to his phone. Daniel's wife went back to her wine. Daniel went back to looking at the waitress. She had not moved. Her apron was soaked. Her hands were raised in the shape of the tray she had been holding 3 seconds earlier. Her eyes were wide, but not panicking. There was something on her face the room couldn't read. It looked like resignation. It looked like the kind of tired, beaten-down courage only people who have worked 10-hour shifts for 12 straight years learn to wear. She did not apologize. She did not bow. She just looked at him. And Daniel looked back, long enough that the whole restaurant noticed. And something in his face changed. Not anger, recognition. "Get out," he said. He didn't say it to the busboy. He said it to her. "Get out of my sight, right now, in front of everyone." "Lena," he said. "Lena Hart." The room went so quiet you could hear the ice crack in a glass at the bar. She took one breath, then another. She folded her soaked apron once, twice, and laid it next to the tray. She placed the empty bowl beside the apron in the shape of a small offering. "I'm sorry about your shirt, sir," she said. Her voice was steady. Everyone in the room knew it had no right to be. "Sir," Daniel repeated, almost a laugh. "Sir, you used to call me Danny." "So this is what you became," he said, 12 years later. "After everything I gave you. After everything you walked out on. Tell him how you left me, Lena. Tell him how you packed one suitcase and disappeared. Tell this whole room how I woke up one morning and you were just gone." She did not flinch. She did not blink. She stood the way you stand when you have rehearsed every version of this moment in your head for 12 years. In the back booths of diners, on the long bus rides home, whispering both versions of the truth to a sleeping 6-year-old. "I have to get back to work," she said. "You don't get to walk away from me twice. Daniel, you don't get to use my name." She nodded, slowly, and she walked out through the service corridor, Not the front door, because servants never use the front door. And she did not cry until she was 2 blocks away. This was the moment the room saw. This was not the moment the night remembered. If you've ever been humiliated in front of people you once loved, hit subscribe right now. Because by morning, the man who broke her heart was about to learn a single sentence that would quietly dismantle the rest of his life. Drop 1 if you're still with her. Drop heart if you already know what she said. But Daniel's world had cracked open 6 weeks earlier, and no one in the restaurant had seen it yet. There had been a letter. The letter came from an old lawyer in Boston named Mr. Harland, whose signature Daniel had last seen on the original incorporation papers of the company he had built from nothing. Mr. Harland had died 2 months earlier at 92, in his sleep, in the same leather chair he had sat in the day he first met a 26-year-old Daniel and a 22-year-old bride in his office. His son had unsealed the safe and found an envelope addressed to Daniel Ashford, in handwriting Daniel had not seen in 12 years. Lena's handwriting. Inside was a share certificate and a short note. If you're reading this, Mr. Harland is gone. Your company is now the property of the Harland Trust. I am the sole beneficiary. These shares were mine before they were yours. I was paid to disappear. Get the truth from your mother before you say my name again. That was 6 weeks ago. Tonight, at 7:15 p.m., in front of 100 strangers, Daniel had called her Lena Hart in a voice loud enough to be heard by every investor in the building. He didn't know the man at the corner table in the charcoal suit had been watching the entire scene. The man at the corner table was not Sato. He had flown in from Zurich that afternoon, on a flight he had not been scheduled to take. He had been sent because the Harland Trust had quietly, in the last 90 days, bought controlling interest in the Halcyon Group. And the Harland Trust's sole trustee was a woman named Lena Hart. He had watched Daniel break the heart of the woman he now reported to. He had counted every word. He had taken 3 photographs in his mind because he was old enough to understand the value of memory over flash. He had not intervened because his instructions were very clear, and because he knew, the way junior partners in Zurich learned to know, that the louder a man breaks a woman's heart in public, the louder his empire is about to break in private. At 7:38 p.m., as the last guests were finishing their desserts, the junior partner stood up. He buttoned his charcoal suit. He walked to Daniel's table and placed a cream-colored envelope in front of him. No name, only a wax seal, a small H. "From your new majority shareholder," he said. "I don't have a majority shareholder," Daniel said. "You do," the man said. "You've had one for 14 years. You just never met her." He turned and walked out the front door. Not the back, the front. Daniel opened the envelope at 3 a.m. in the back seat of his car, parked outside the apartment of his mother, who had not answered his calls in 9 weeks. Inside was the board resolution. Effective 9 a.m., the Harland Trust was assuming full operational control of the Halcyon Group, restructuring the board, voiding the Sato deal, freezing all personal accounts until 11 a.m., and issuing Daniel Ashford a formal cease and desist on contact with any employee of the trust until 11:15 a.m. Below the resolution was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. On it, in 12-year-old handwriting, was one sentence. If you have ever watched a quiet man rip his own empire apart at 3 a.m., hit the bell. Because what Lena wrote on that piece of paper is not a sentence. It is a verdict. And to understand that verdict, you have to understand what Daniel's mother did in the spring of 2014. The scene now shifts to a courthouse in Boston, to the spring of 2014, where everything began. Daniel had been 26 then. Lena had been 22. They had married in a small courthouse in Boston on a Wednesday morning because Wednesday was the cheapest day to rent a room, and Lena had worn a second-hand dress because Daniel had spent his last dollar on the license. They had eaten 2 slices of cake in the parking lot, then walked 3 blocks to Mr. Harlan's office. Mr. Harlan had taken off his glasses and said, "And what will you bring to this company, Mrs. Ashford?" Lena had smiled. "My name," she had said. "I am bringing his name into the world, and he is bringing mine into the books." Mr. Harlan had written her name on the certificate himself, not as a wife, as a partner. 8 years later, in 2014, Lena was 26 weeks pregnant. Daniel's mother, Margaret Ashford, had begun coming to their brownstone every Sunday with a quiet gift and a quieter question. She sat at the foot of the bed while Lena folded towels in the next room. "She is on the certificate because she was a pretty bride," Margaret had said, just loud enough to carry. "She is not a pretty partner." Lena heard every word. She stood at the top of the stairs, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold in her hands, pressing her palm against the small of her back, where the baby was turning in a way that felt, to her, like a warning. 3 weeks before the baby was due, Lena went to Mr. Harlan's office alone. "Mr. Harlan," she had said, "I think I am about to lose my husband." "How much do you have saved?" $6,241, Lena had said, "and a watch my mother gave me at 21. Mr. Harlan had taken the watch. He had sold it for $19,000. He had taken her $6,241. He had used his own money to buy, quietly, over the next 11 months, exactly 51% of the controlling shares of the Halcyon Group. He had put them in a trust named for his mother, Sarah Harlan. Lena was the sole beneficiary. "Do not touch these shares until the day Daniel says your name like a curse in front of 100 people, Mr. Harlan had said. "When that day comes, you walk into his boardroom and you take back the only thing he ever stole from you." Lena had cried for 41 minutes. She had not seen Mr. Harlan again. The next morning, Margaret Ashford had come to the brownstone at 6 a.m. with a small suitcase and a larger lie. She had given Lena $20,000 in cash. She had taken her to a hotel across town. She had paid for the baby to be delivered under the Harlan Trust's insurance. And on the morning Daniel had woken up alone, his mother had called him at 7 a.m. "She left you, sweetheart," she had said. "She took one suitcase and disappeared." Daniel had believed her for 12 years. But the question now, what Lena did with the $20,000, drop a comment below. Cash or trust? We're going to find out very soon. And the answer is going to change the way you understand the word waitress forever. The truth is this. Lena had not disappeared. She had moved into a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet on the 3rd floor of a Cambridge building whose elevator had been broken since 2009. She had worked 2 shifts a day, mornings at a bakery, nights at a steakhouse 2 blocks from the apartment she had once used to dream about nurseries. She had given birth alone in a hospital where the nurses were kind in the way nurses only are when they know a woman has nothing. She had held her daughter for 11 hours before she was allowed to name her, and she had named her Sarah, after Mr. Harlan's mother. She raised Sarah on buses, on macaroni and cheese and the occasional pancake that Sarah would later describe in school essays as the best meal in the world. On a phone that had not been upgraded since 2013. On a Sunday morning phone call from a mother-in-law who reminded her every single week for 11 years of the price. "I am doing this for the baby," Margaret would say. And one day, when it is safe, you will see her. But not yet. Lena had believed her for 11 years. She had not known, until Mr. Harlan's son unsealed the safe, that the trust existed. She had not known she was the sole trustee. She had not known that her $6,241 and her mother's watch had quietly, patiently, over 11 years, become 51% of the company she had helped found. She had cried again. For 43 minutes this time. She had called the junior partner in Zurich. She had asked him to fly to Boston. She had asked him to wait. She had not told him why. And she had gone back to her shift. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She had worked. She had watched Mr. Harlan's son call at the end of each week to ask a single question. Has he said her name yet? And each week, until last Tuesday, Lena had said, No, not yet. Last Tuesday, Daniel had opened the envelope. And Lena had known that this Tuesday was going to be different. She had missed the first turn of the tray because, 6 minutes earlier, her daughter had called. Mommy, am I going to be a waitress too? Lena had told her, in the gentlest voice a mother can use when she is trying not to break her own heart. No, baby. You are going to be the woman who decides who is allowed to call her a waitress. She had hung up. She had picked up the tray. She had taken 15 steps. The bowl tipped. If this hits you the way it hit me, hit like now. Because what happens after Lena walks out is the moment a man who has been running an empire for 20 years realizes he has been running on stolen time. And the person who steals it back is not a lawyer, not a banker. It is a woman in a soaked apron who has not slept a full night in 12 years. Now we return to the room. It is still 7:15 p.m. The silence where Lena had just walked out through the service corridor. Daniel's face, which the room was now beginning to read as something they had not seen before. It was not just embarrassment. It was not just anger. It was the look of a man whose hand is still on the table, but the table has just been quietly moved an inch to the left. The maitre d' had quietly canceled the second course. Sato was being walked to a private dining room. Daniel's wife was dabbing the broth from his cuff with a napkin she had stolen from another table. She did not ask Daniel what Lena had meant. She did not ask because she did not want to know. Every person in the room heard the words. Sato heard them. The maitre d' heard them. The busboy heard them. The chef peering through the kitchen line heard them. And Lena, walking 2 blocks away with her soaked apron folded in her bag, did not need to hear them. Because she already knew. Lena had known for 6 weeks. Lena had known for 11 years. Lena had known since the morning Mr. Harland had said, "Do not touch these shares until the day Daniel says your name like a curse in front of 100 people." And tonight, Daniel had said her name. Tonight, he had said it like a curse. Tonight, she had stood in front of 100 witnesses and not flinched. And tonight, she was already on a bus back to Cambridge, to a studio apartment with a broken elevator, to a 6-year-old daughter who was sitting up in bed with the bedroom light on waiting for her mother, and who would, in 7 hours, learn that the man who had called her mother a waitress was about to learn that her mother was not a waitress. Her mother was the woman who finally had the pen. Hit subscribe if you have ever been a child waiting for a mother in a room with a broken elevator. Because in the next scene, Daniel is about to sit in the back seat of his car at 3 a.m. and read the same sentence his daughter is going to read 7 years from now. And the sentence is going to break him in a way no court, no lawyer, no public apology ever could. The night deepens. It is now 3 a.m. on a Wednesday.
Daniel did not open the envelope until 3 a.m. He did not open it at the restaurant because the maitre d' would have seen it. He did not open it at home because his wife would have asked. He did not open it at his sister's house because his sister would have said, "I told you so." He opened it in the back seat of his car, parked outside the apartment of his mother on Beacon Hill, who had not answered his calls in 9 weeks. The porch light was off.
The doorman, a man who had been working the building since 1968, had stopped letting Margaret Ashford's son pass the front step 3 months earlier, after a quiet conversation he had had with Mr. Harlan's son on a Sunday afternoon. The instructions had been specific. Daniel sat in his car for 15 minutes. He stared at the wax seal, a small H, and for the first time in his adult life, he did not know what H stood for. He had spent 43 years knowing what every letter meant. He had built a vocabulary of corporate acronyms from his first year at Wharton. He had not realized, until 3:07 a.m. on a Wednesday, that there was a letter in his life he had never learned. He broke the seal. The board resolution. Effective 9 a.m., the Harlan Trust, through its sole trustee Lena Hart, was assuming full operational control of the Halcyon Group. The resolution restructured the board. It voided the Sato deal. It froze all personal accounts until 11 a.m. It issued Daniel Ashford a formal cease and desist on contact with any employee of the trust until 11:15 a.m. And the cease and desist named every waitress, every busboy, every sous chef, every line cook in the entire Halcyon portfolio. Below the resolution was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. On it was one sentence in handwriting Daniel had not seen in 12 years. He read it once. He read it twice. He called his mother at 3:04 a.m. The call went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He called a third time. Voicemail, and the voicemail box was now full. He drove home. He sat in his driveway for 45 minutes. He watched the front door of his house, a house Lena had once sent him photographs of when she was still trying to guess what color the nursery should be. And he tried to remember the last time he had felt as small as he felt right now. He remembered it. It was a morning in 2006 when Lena had stood in front of him in Mr. Harlan's office and had said, "I am bringing my name into the world." He remembered now that the last words she had ever said to him, in person, were not, "I am leaving you." They were, "I am sorry I can't see the baby." He had not heard her say that because he had been 26 years old, 90 hours into a work week, and he had slept through the moment his life ended. He opened the bottom drawer. He took out the original letter. He placed it next to the new one. He sat in the silent room. He realized, at 4:14 a.m., that the room he had been sitting in for 14 years had always been hers. Not legally, not financially, architecturally. She had been the room he had built his life inside. She had been the reason the room had walls. She had been the reason the walls had a window. And now the window was open, and the wind was beginning to come in. If this scene is hitting you, hit like now, because what Daniel is about to do at 9 a.m. is the moment the entire story pivots, and he has no idea Lena is already standing in the building with a piece of paper he has not seen in 12 years, in handwriting he will never forget again. Dawn breaks. It is now 8:55 the next morning. By 8:55 the next morning, Daniel was sitting in a chair outside a conference room on the 14th floor of a building he owned. The chair was brown leather. The conference room was the one he used for his most important board meetings. But the chairs inside were not his. A man in a charcoal suit was standing at the door. The man nodded once. The door opened. She walked in. She was wearing a black dress. Not the same black dress as 12 years ago, a new one. But her hair was the same. Her hands were trembling, but the trembling was the kind of invisible exhaustion that comes from 12 years of 2 shifts, 2 buses, 1 apartment, 1 daughter, and 1 phone call a week from a mother-in-law who reminded her every single Sunday for 11 years that she was a stain her son had finally washed out. Sarah was down the hall, in a smaller office, with a cup of hot chocolate and a coloring book. Lena sat across from Daniel. She did not smile. She did not cry. She placed her hands in her lap, the way a woman places her hands when she has finally realized she does not need to perform anything for the man across the table. "You said," she began, "that I never once in my life deserved to be in this room." Daniel opened his mouth. "Shut up," she said. Not cruelly, just the quiet way you say it when you have practiced the sentence in the mirror for 10,000 mornings. And the 10,001st morning is the morning you finally mean it. Daniel closed his mouth. "You said I would always be a waitress, Daniel. You said it loud enough for your wife to hear. Loud enough for my 6-year-old to hear, because she was in the kitchen that night, visiting her mother on her break, and she heard every word her father said about her mother. And she did not sleep for 3 nights after, and she has not slept for a single full night since." Her voice had not broken. "You called me Lena Hart. You said my name like a curse. You said, 'So this is what you became.' 12 years, Daniel. 12 years I have been what I became because someone paid me to disappear. And for 12 years I have built, with 2 jobs and a studio apartment and 1 daughter, the only thing I ever had left to build." She placed a single sheet of paper on the table between them. It was the original share certificate from the day Daniel had incorporated the Halcyon Group. A broke 26-year-old with a $100 idea and a wife who believed in him more than he believed in himself. The certificate had 2 names on it: Daniel Ashford and Lena Hart. "Sign it," she said. "Sign it in front of your lawyers. Sign it in front of the board. Sign it in front of whoever still believes the man your mother has been telling everyone you are." Daniel picked up the pen. He did not write. He looked at her. He tried to speak. She beat him to it. "You broke my heart in front of 100 people last night, Daniel. So I'm going to give you back the only thing that has ever been worth breaking." She leaned forward. She said the sentence. Exactly 1 sentence. "I didn't leave you, Daniel." A beat. "I never did." Another beat. "Your mother paid me to disappear." And then, before he could speak, "Now you get to live with that." The room was silent. The air conditioners were off. The cameras in the corners were off. There was only the sound of a man breathing and a woman who had been waiting 12 years to say the one sentence that would end him gently, the way he had ended her loudly. She stood up. She buttoned her jacket, the same black jacket from 12 years ago, the one she had kept, the one she had worn to every meeting of the trust because she had made a promise to herself in the back of a diner in 2014 that one day she would wear this jacket back into this man's life. She walked to the door. She paused. She did not look back. "Your daughter," she said, "wants to know if her father is still a monster or if he is finally a man. I will tell her what I see in this room at 9:14 this morning. You have 4 minutes to decide." She walked out. The door closed. The pen Daniel had been holding snapped in 2. His hand was bleeding. He did not feel the pain until a long time later, weeks later,
when he tried to write his first letter to the daughter he had never met. And the two thin scars on his left hand would be the only physical thing he could ever point to and say, "This was the morning my old life ended." Daniel sat alone in that room for 43 minutes. If your chest is hurting right now, hit like. If your stomach is hurting, hit heart. And if you have ever walked out of a room and let the door close on someone who thought they owned you, write one word in the comments. Regal. We're not done. Daniel has a phone call to make, and the woman on the other end of that call is going to say yes 3 times. And every yes is going to cost her a year of her life.
The clock reaches 9:57 a.m. At 9:57 a.m., Daniel picked up the phone. He did not dial his mother. He dialed Mr. Harlan's son. "You knew," Daniel said. "Yes," the son said. "For how long?" "Since the morning he died." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because my father made me promise not to," the son said. "He said a man who learns the truth in a letter is a man who has learned it twice as hard as a man who learns it in front of 100 witnesses." Daniel was quiet. "My father," the son said, "believed Lena was the only honest shareholder you ever had. He believed Margaret Ashford had been running a quiet fraud on your marriage since 2012. He believed every dollar in your life that wasn't earned by your own hands was purchased with money your mother had quietly removed from a man who never knew he had the money." Daniel closed his eyes. "My father did not want to tell you because my father believed you would have gone to Lena. And if you had gone to Lena, Margaret would have found a way to take the baby. My father believed the only safe place for Lena and Sarah was the place Lena eventually found. The back of a diner, the back of a bus, the back of a studio apartment with a broken elevator." "Is Lena safe now?" Daniel asked. "Yes," the son said. "She has been safe since the morning my father died. The trust has been quietly acquiring for 11 years. The trust has never been vulnerable. The trust has simply been waiting." "For what?" "For Daniel Ashford to say her name like a curse." Daniel put the phone down. He called his mother. The call lasted 1 hour and 17 minutes. He did not yell. He did not break a wall. He did not slam a receiver. He asked her, very quietly, 3 times, "Did you pay her to disappear?" And 3 times, his mother said, very quietly, "Yes." The 3rd time, his mother said, "I did it for you, Daniel. I did it so you could be the man you wanted to be." Daniel was quiet for 11 seconds. Then he said, "Mother, you did it so I could be the man you wanted me to be. Those are not the same man. And that is the sentence I am going to live with for the rest of my life." He put the phone down. His mother hung up on him. At 11:15 a.m., Daniel walked down the 14th floor corridor to the smaller room where Lena was waiting with the new board. He did not speak. He placed the broken pen, both halves, on the table. He did not pick up a new one. He just said, very quietly, "Tell me where to sign." Lena did not smile. But something in her shoulders, something she had been carrying since the morning she left a brownstone with 1 suitcase and a phone call from a mother-in-law saying, "Take the money, Lena." "Take it and disappear, and don't ever come back." And I will tell my son you left him of his own free will. He will hate you forever. That is the price. Dropped, just slightly, the way a plane drops after takeoff. She nodded once. The meeting began. Hit subscribe if you have ever carried something for 12 years and felt it drop the moment someone said, "Tell me where to sign." 3 days later, Daniel's mother signed over every asset she had hidden from the trust. 2 weeks after that, Lena quietly dissolved the controlling interest and returned the company to Daniel. But only after he signed 4 stipulations, written in Lena's own hand, witnessed by Mr. Harlan's son. 1. He would see his daughter twice a week, every week, in a place Lena approved. 2. He would fund Sarah's school completely, from elementary through university, with a check released every semester and an audit by the trust each year. 3. He would never speak to his mother alone again, would never visit her home alone again, would never accept a gift, a loan, a phone call, a voicemail, or a letter from her without the trust present. 4. He would apologize publicly, on the record, to the woman he had once called a waitress in front of 100 people who had never learned her name. He did all 4. Now the calendar jumps forward. It is 1 year later, on a stage at the Halcyon Theater in Boston. Lena stood next to a man who had finally remembered how small he was. He did not hold her hand. She did not need him to. Her daughter stood 6 feet behind her, wearing the black jacket she had been promised on the morning everything changed. Sarah was 7 years old. The room was full. Sato was there. The junior partner from Zurich was there. The maitre d' who had canceled the second course was there. The busboy who had been running was there. The chef who had peered through the kitchen line was there. Daniel took the stage. He unbuttoned his cuff. He did not look at Lena. He looked at Sarah. My name is Daniel Ashford. A year ago tonight, I stood in a restaurant in Boston, and I called a woman a waitress in front of 100 people. That woman was the mother of my daughter. That woman was the woman who had signed her name on the certificate of the company I had built. That woman was the woman my mother had paid to disappear 12 years earlier. I did not know any of this. I am telling you this now because I am telling her now, in front of the only people who ever witnessed what I did. He looked at Lena. I am sorry, Lena. He looked at Sarah. I am sorry, Sarah. He looked at the room. I am sorry to every waitress, every busboy, every sous chef, every line cook, every hostess, every maitre d' in any restaurant I have ever been inside. I have been wrong about what it means to bring a tray to a table. I have been wrong about what it means to drop a bowl. I have been wrong about what it means to be paid in tips by a man in a Brioni suit who has never once walked through the kitchen door. He paused. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I am asking for you to remember that a man can spend 43 years building a vocabulary of corporate letters and still not know what the H stands for. The H stands for Harland. And the Harland Trust was the only honest shareholder I have ever had. He closed his notebook. He walked off the stage. He did not shake hands. Lena stood up. She did not step to the microphone. She was already standing in front of it. She had written her speech in the back of a taxi on the way to the theater. She had folded it twice. She had placed it in the same pocket of the same black jacket she had worn to every meeting of the trust, the same jacket she had first put on at 6 a.m. on the morning she had been told, in a hotel room across town, that her daughter had been delivered, and that the man who had paid for that delivery was not the man who had paid for it. The waitress remembers everything, she said. She did not read from the paper. The waitress remembers every room she has ever entered with a tray in her hand. She remembers every cuff she has ever spilled broth on. She remembers every napkin stolen from another table to wipe the sleeve of a man who believes his sleeve is worth more than her week. She remembers every name she has been called. She remembers every sir she has ever said. She remembers every ma'am she has ever said. She remembers every thank you that was not said. She paused. The waitress also remembers every bus ride home. The waitress also remembers every key that has ever broken in a lock. The waitress also remembers every hat she has ever taken off at the end of a shift. The waitress also remembers every mirror she has ever looked into on every Sunday morning when the mother-in-law has just called to remind her of the price. She looked directly at Daniel, who was sitting in the front row. Forget her once, Daniel, and she will rebuild your empire. She looked at the room. Forget her twice, and she will sit in the chair you thought you owned, and she will say the one sentence that breaks you in front of the only people who ever mattered to you. She looked back at Daniel. Forget her a third time, and she will not come back. The room was silent. The room was full. The room, the whole room, finally understood that the woman by the microphone had been the strongest one in it all along. She stepped away from the microphone. She did not bow. She walked to her daughter. She took her daughter's hand. She walked to the door. She did not look at Daniel. Daniel watched her go. He did not follow her. He did not need to. The last sound anyone heard before the door closed was the soft clack of Sarah's shoes on the wood floor of the Halcyon Theater. Walking out of a building her great-grandfather had signed the deed for in 1962. Walking past the maitre d' who had canceled her mother's second course a year earlier. Walking past the busboy whose eyes had been closed on the night her mother had been called a waitress. Walking into a Boston night where the broken elevator was finally going to be fixed. Not by a developer, not by a trust, but by her mother, who had carried for 12 years a black jacket with no name on it that was about to become the most photographed piece of clothing in the city. The door closed. The room stayed silent for 4 seconds. And then a man in the third row, an old waiter who had never once been asked to sit at a private table in his life, stood up, and he began to clap by himself. If this story hit you in the chest, leave one word below. Regal. If it hit you in the stomach, leave one word. Heart. And if you are still with Lena, if you have ever been a waitress, a busboy, a bus driver, a key turner, a mother with a broken elevator, a daughter waiting in a small room for a mother to come home, hit subscribe right now. Because next week, I'm going to tell you the sentence Daniel's mother said to Lena at 9:58 a.m. the morning Lena walked out the 14th floor corridor. It is a sentence so quiet, it broke an empire without raising a single voice. And you do not want to be the kind of person who has never heard it.